She was paid $20 to ruin a blind date, and unexpectedly, the millionaire CEO fell in love. Before we start the story, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And a tunket. The end. Don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. $20. That's all I've got, Leah said, holding out the crumpled bill as if she were offering a diamond. Harper raised an eyebrow and crossed her arms, still wearing her restaurant apron like it was a suit of armor. Only $20? You're rich, my friend. That barely covers my emotional rent. Please, Leah begged, clasping her hands like she was performing a third-rate magic trick. My parents are the rich ones, not me. You just need to ruin the date. 10 minutes tops. Pretend you hate me, that I'm awful, that I snore like a jackhammer. Make something up. Just make sure he never wants to see me again. It was Saturday night in Chicago. The restaurant where Harper worked, the Ivory Table, was packed with wealthy couples and expensive dinners served with French words. Harper, on the other hand, was paid by the hour, shared an apartment with a dying plant and a gecko. Leah had been her best friend since high school, and now her parents were forcing her to go on a blind date with a promising young man, heir to a fortune, according to her mother. But Leah already had a boyfriend, a broke boyfriend, invisible to her family's elite eyes. The arranged date was a threat, and Harper was the perfect distraction. Okay, Harper said, taking a deep breath and grabbing the bill. But if he leaves before the main course, you owe me an extra strawberry milkshake. Harper walked into the dining room with the confidence of someone who had nothing to lose. Her hair was tied up haphazardly, a notepad in one hand, and chaos in her head. She spotted the table in the brightest corner of the room. Leah sat up straight, her smile frozen, her eyes pleading. Next to her, sitting with calm elegance, was the man, charcoal gray suit, understated watch, and a gaze as steady as it was dangerous. The kind of man who seemed to know exactly how much money was in his account and never had to worry about it. Harper swallowed. This was supposed to be just a blind date. Why did the guy look like he'd stepped out of a Billionaire CEO magazine? She walked up to the table, pretending she knew nothing. Good evening, she said, forcing an overly bright smile. My name's Harper, and I'll be taking care of you tonight, or ruining everything, depending on how you look at it. Leah nearly choked on her water. The man, Dylan, just looked up, curious. What can I get you to drink? Harper asked, looking straight at Dylan. Just don't order sparkling water. Leah snores so loudly in her sleep she wakes the upstairs neighbor. Oh, and she snores like a tractor too. Did you know she talks in her sleep? Full sentences. One time she yelled, "Give me back my croissant," at 3 o'clock in the morning. The neighbor knocked on the door thinking there was a bakery fight. Dylan raised an eyebrow. Harper. Leah gasped, pretending to be outraged. Oh, sorry, Harper said dramatically. Was I supposed to save that for the third date? Dylan laughed, a short, quiet, but genuine laugh. And what would you recommend for dinner? He asked, still looking at Harper. Well, I'd recommend something with lots of garlic. Leah loves garlic. She eats 6 cloves a day, Harper said, smiling. Leah's face turned red. Dylan leaned forward, clearly entertained. Does she cook? He asked, already knowing the answer. Cook? The last time she tried to make rice, she created a new form of charcoal. It was an emotional moment. The kitchen cried. Dylan laughed again, this time more freely. Leah looked like she wanted to disappear under the table. Harper went on for a few minutes, spinning one embarrassing story after another. Dylan didn't look repulsed. He looked amused. His eyes stayed on Harper. He barely glanced at Leah. Finally, Harper walked away, heading back to the counter with a triumphant smile. Mission accomplished. What she didn't expect was that Dylan's gaze would still be following her when she turned around. Hours later, in the small apartment Harper shared with Leah and the nearly dead plant named Steve, the two sat in pajamas, ice cream in their laps, laughing about the night. It worked, Leah cheered. He didn't even finish dessert. Said he had urgent commitments, left all formal. I told you the exploding lasagna accident would seal the deal. Harper, you're a genius. A genius who works for tips, but thank you, Harper said. They clinked their spoons like glasses. The plant on the windowsill seemed to sway in approval. What Harper didn't know was that the next day, Dylan, the calm-eyed, faint-smiled millionaire heir, was feeling very intrigued. The next morning, Harper woke up at 10 o'clock with her hair looking like a rebellious bird's nest and the feeling she had forgotten something important. "Oh, right. You could at least warn me when I oversleep," she muttered to the plant, which was still committed to its mission of slowly dying on the windowsill. On Sundays, the ivory table was a different place. Fewer dazzled couples, more families trying to impress in-laws, and lonely executives pretending to read financial newspapers while eating alone. Harper liked Sundays. Less drama, more tips born from existential guilt. She tied the apron around her waist and checked the tables in her section. Table 3, a family with 3 kids who had already turned the floor into a battlefield of crumbs. Table 5, an elderly couple debating whether the sauce had too much salt or not enough love. Table 7, empty as it usually stayed until good afternoon. Harper almost dropped her tray. It was him, the man from yesterday's date. She hadn't even paid much attention to his name in all the confusion. "You," she said, pointing at him with her pen as if identifying a suspect. "What are you doing here?" "Having lunch," he replied with that restrained smile that was already starting to annoy Harper simply because it was far too charming. "This is a restaurant, isn't it?" "It is." But Harper hesitated. "Yesterday you ran out of here like you'd seen the ghost of Italian cuisine. I thought I'd traumatized you forever." "Actually," Dylan said, sitting down comfortably in the chair as if he had all day, "I came back for the food." "Really?" Harper raised a skeptical eyebrow. "You didn't even taste anything yesterday." "Exactly. I got curious." Harper studied him for a moment. He was wearing a light blue shirt, no tie, and looked more relaxed than the night before. Less formal, more human. "Well," she said, picking up her notepad, "what will you have? Just so you know, our special sauce today is chaos seasoned with irony. A house specialty." Dylan laughed, a genuine sound that made Harper blink in surprise. Chaos and irony. Interesting combination. That's what gives life its flavor. Without it, everything gets very dull. "And you know a lot about life's seasonings." "Well, I've been working here for 3 years serving people who make more in a month than I do in a year. If that doesn't teach you about irony, nothing will." Dylan tilted his head, genuinely interested. "And the chaos?" "Oh, chaos is my specialty," Harper said dramatically. "Sometimes I can even ruin a romantic date in 15 minutes using nothing but embarrassing stories and creativity. It's an art form." "I saw that." "Very impressive." Harper stopped, pen suspended in the air. "Wait, you thought that was impressive? Most people find it disturbing. Most people are boring." There was a moment of silence where Harper didn't quite know what to say. Compliments weren't exactly her area of expertise. "Anyway," she cleared her throat, "what do you want to eat? And don't say you choose because that's too much responsibility for someone who can barely pick which socks to wear in the morning." "But I do want you to choose." "Why?" "Because you work here. You must know what's really good." Harper stared at him, looking for signs of sarcasm. She vigilance none. "All right, but if you complain, remember it was your idea." "Noted." Harper scribbled down the order and walked away, but not before noticing Dylan watching her as she moved. Not the typical bored customer look, but something different. Curious, interested. In the kitchen, she handed the order to Marcus, the chef. "Table 7 wants the salmon with passion fruit sauce and the arugula salad with walnuts." "The guy at table 7 hasn't stopped looking at you since he got here," Marcus said as he seasoned a pan. "Do you know him?" "Sort of. It's complicated." "Complicated like psychotic ex-boyfriend or complicated like millionaire heir falling for the waitress?" Harper laughed. "Complicated like I have no idea what's going on." When she came back with a drink, Dylan was reading something on his phone, but he immediately put it away when he saw her. "So," she said, setting the glass on the table, "while you're waiting for your food, how about telling me why you really came back here? And I'm not accepting, for the food, as an answer." "Why not?" "Mom, can I put my drawing in the window?" Sophie asked, already running around the elegant cafe in the lobby of the Parker Tower before even hearing the answer. "Sophie, stay close to me." Kate tried to grab her, but the girl was already crossing the polished lobby, chatting with security guards and receptionists as if they were old friends. The sound of expensive shoes echoed through the hall. Daniel Parker, CEO of Parker & Company, was striding quickly across the space, phone pressed to his ear, clearly in a hurry. As he bent down to pick up the pen he had dropped, he came face to face with Sophie. "Hi," she said, grinning from ear to ear. He gave her a polite smile until his gaze landed on the silver pendant swinging from the girl's neck. A circle with a small engraving, impossible to mistake. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. A distant summer flashed in his mind. Laughter by the shore, a young woman with sparkling eyes, and him placing that very pendant around her neck before saying goodbye, not knowing they would never see each other again. His voice came out lower than he meant. "Where did you get that necklace?" Sophie blinked, innocent. "Mom gave it to me." She said, "It's important." Daniel's stomach tightened. He had to find out who this girl's mother was and whether she was the same woman he had never been able to forget. He stood still for a few seconds, watching Sophie run back toward the cafe. The pendant kept swinging, each movement stirring memories he had tried to bury for years. Taking a deep breath, he followed her, trying to look casual as he walked toward Manhattan Brews. Through the glass doors, he saw a woman behind the counter. Brown hair pulled into a messy bun, navy blue uniform, moving quickly as she filled orders. Even from the back, something about her posture felt familiar. When she turned, Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. Kate, no doubt about it. The same expressive eyes, the same smile that used to light up her face when she laughed at his bad jokes. Of course, she had changed. A more mature face, a few faint lines that hadn't been there 15 years ago. But it was her. Definitely her. The penman, Sophie pointed at Daniel, who was still outside, clearly watching through the glass. Kate looked up and made a face of mild impatience. "Sophie, come back here. And you, sir, if you want something, you'll have to come in and order like everyone else." Daniel pushed the door open, trying to seem natural. He walked up to the counter with what he hoped was a charming smile, but Kate had already turned her attention back to the espresso machine. "Good morning. One Americano, please," he said, trying to make eye contact. "Size?" Kate asked without looking at him, busy filling another cup. "Large. And it's a beautiful morning, isn't it?" Kate finally met his eyes, her expression making it clear she saw him as just another board executive trying to make small talk. "Sir, it's 8:59 in the morning. I've got 15 orders in line and a daughter running loose. If you want to talk about the weather, I suggest you call the meteorology service." Some customers in line chuckled quietly. Daniel felt his face warm, but he pressed on. "Of course, sorry. It's just that your daughter is very sweet. She reminds me of..." Kate cut him off, handing him the cup. "Next." At that moment, Sophie came running with a tray of sugar she had grabbed from a nearby table. In her rush to show Daniel she could help Mom, she bumped into his arm just as he was about to take a sip. Hot coffee spilled across Daniel's white Italian shirt, a brown stain spreading quickly over the expensive fabric. A few customers gasped, and Sophie's eyes went wide. "Oh no, I'm sorry." Daniel expected Kate to shower him with apologies and offer to pay for dry cleaning. Instead, she simply reached under the counter, pulled out a clean apron, and handed it to him. "Here, it'll look better than that shirt all messed up," she said with an amused smile. "Besides, now you have a legitimate excuse for being late to your meeting." "How do you know I have a meeting?" "Because every man in a suit who comes rushing in here at 9 o'clock in the morning has a meeting. And they're usually the same ones who try to talk about the weather when it's obvious they're just trying to impress someone." More laughter from the customers. Daniel, holding the apron, wasn't sure if he should be annoyed or impressed by her reply. "Sophie, next time you want to help, ask first," Kate told her daughter, but without harshness. "Now go play with your drawings while Mommy works." "Is he going to be mad at me?" Sophie asked, looking at Daniel with big eyes. "No, sweetheart." Daniel crouched down to her level. "It was an accident. Accidents happen." Sophie smiled in relief and ran to a corner table where paper and colored pencils were scattered. Daniel turned back to Kate, who was already working on the next order. "Thanks for the apron." "You're welcome. And next time, drink your coffee more carefully or keep your distance from my daughter when she's in helper mode." Daniel laughed, tying the apron over his stained shirt. "Noted." On the 47th floor of the Parker Tower, Daniel was trying to focus on the quarterly presentation happening in an hour, but his eyes kept drifting to the window that overlooked the cafe below. Even from that height, he could see the activity at the entrance of Manhattan Brews. It couldn't be a coincidence. Kate, living in New York, working in the very building he passed every day, with a daughter wearing the pendant he'd given her 15 years ago. The odds were astronomical. "Marcus," he called through the intercom. His assistant appeared at the door in seconds, tablet in hand and wearing his usual efficient expression. "I need you to discreetly look into someone." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. In 5 years working for Daniel, he had learned not to ask unnecessary questions. "Kate," Daniel realized he didn't know her last name. "The woman who works at the cafe downstairs, brown hair, has a young daughter. I want to know where she lives, how long she's worked here, her family situation, the basics." "Understood. When do you need it?" "Yesterday." Marcus nodded and left. Daniel looked back out the window, drumming his fingers on the desk. If it really was her, why hadn't she recognized him? Or had she, and she was pretending not to? And the daughter, how old was she? 6? 7? A knot tightened in his stomach. He did a quick calculation in his head and didn't like the answer. Meanwhile, at the cafe, Kate was fighting her own battle. "Rodriguez." Margaret's sharp voice, the supervisor, rang out across the place. "My office now." Kate sighed, asked Jenny, the other employee, to keep an eye on Sophie, and followed Margaret into the small back room. "Sit," Margaret ordered, crossing her arms. She was a woman in her 50s, always wearing an expression like she just sucked on a lemon. "How many times have I told you this is no place for a child?" "Margaret," I explained. "The babysitter canceled last minute, and I couldn't miss work." "I don't want to hear your excuses. This is a business, not a daycare, and now your daughter is spilling coffee on customers." Kate felt irritation rising. It was an accident, and the customer didn't complain. "Doesn't matter. Either you fix the situation, or you'll need to find another job. And let me tell you, jobs for people without a college degree aren't exactly easy to come by." The comment about her degree felt like a punch to the gut, but Kate kept her face neutral. Over the years, she had learned that showing vulnerability to people like Margaret was like handing them ammunition for more attacks. "I understand your position," Kate said, standing. "Can I get back to work now?" Margaret waved dismissively, and Kate left the room. Outside, she noticed some nearby customers had overheard the conversation. Her face grew warm with embarrassment. "Hey, don't let her get to you," said a man in his 40s, sipping a cappuccino. "I've got 3 kids. I know how hard it can be." "That's true," agreed a woman at the next table. "That woman treats everyone badly. The other day, she was super rude to me because I asked for a different type of milk." "Thank you," Kate smiled, genuinely touched by the solidarity. "You're very kind." "Your daughter is adorable," said another customer. "She came over to show me the picture she drew. A family of 3 holding hands. Very sweet." Kate looked over at Sophie, who had returned to her table and was now drawing intently, her tongue sticking out in concentration. Her heart warmed, and she decided that for today, that was what mattered. "Sophie does that a lot," she told the customers. "I think she wants to be an artist when she grows up, or a diplomat." The man laughed. "She convinced the security guard over there to let her use his pen to draw." Kate looked and saw Sophie showing something to the guard, who smiled and waved at her. Even in difficult circumstances, her daughter managed to brighten people's days. It was a gift Kate envied. Marcus returned to Daniel's office 2 hours later, his tablet loaded with information. "I got the basic details," he said, placing the tablet on the desk. "Kate Rodriguez, 32 years old, single, lives in Queens, rents an apartment. She's been working here for 8 months, morning shift, Also works part-time at a laundromat 3 blocks away. One child, Sophie Rodriguez, 6 years old. Daniel skimmed the information quickly. Nothing about the girl's father? Not in the records. From what I could quietly find out, she's been raising her daughter alone from the start. And the pendant the girl wears? Marcus frowned. Pendant? Never mind, Daniel muttered, realizing how odd that sounded. Anything else? Just that she seems to be a good employee, never missed a day, never late, and customers like her. Aside from today's incident with the supervisor. What incident? Marcus recounted the conversation he'd overheard about Margaret threatening to fire Kate because of her daughter. Daniel felt a pang of guilt since, technically, the whole thing had started when Sophie spilled coffee on him. Anything else? Only a personal observation, Marcus hesitated. This kind of digging into employees, it's not your usual style. Mind if I ask why? Daniel looked out the window again. Down below, he could see Kate wiping tables in the cafe's outdoor seating area, Sophie playing nearby. It's complicated, Marcus. And maybe I'm imagining connections that aren't there. The pendant could be common, Marcus said, as if reading his thoughts. Jewelry stores sell thousands just like it. Daniel nodded but wasn't convinced. Something about the way Sophie had said, "Mommy gave it to me and said it's important," kept echoing in his mind. And now, watching Kate from a distance, all the memories of that long-ago summer came rushing back. He needed to be sure, one way or another. Over the next 3 days, Daniel developed an odd routine for a CEO, heading downstairs to stretch his legs every day between 10 and 10:30 in the morning, exactly when Sophie was most energetic and chatting with everyone in the cafe. On Monday, he arrived while she was explaining to an elderly customer why cats were better than dogs. On Tuesday, she was teaching a businesswoman how to make paper airplanes out of napkins. And on Wednesday, she had convinced 2 security guards to join a drawing contest. "You again," Kate said when she saw him approaching the counter for the 3rd time that week. "Let me guess. Large Americano." "Actually, today I'll have a cappuccino," Daniel smiled, watching Sophie, who had just figured out how to make the sugar dispenser play music by tapping it with a spoon. "Your daughter is very creative." "That's a polite way to put it," Kate laughed, grabbing a cup. "Sophie, stop making music with the utensils." "But it sounds nice, Mom. Listen." Sophie tapped out a rhythmic beat that was surprisingly melodic. Some customers clapped, and she gave a theatrical bow. Daniel couldn't help but laugh. "She definitely has personality," he commented. Kate studied him for a moment. "Can I ask you something? Why does a man like you keep showing up here? I mean, I'm sure you have plenty of coffee options in the city." Daniel felt his face warm. "A man like me, you know, rich, important, probably has an assistant who can fetch coffee for him." Kate finished making the cappuccino and set it on the counter. $5.75. As he reached for his wallet, Daniel tried to come up with an answer that wouldn't sound completely crazy. "Actually, I'm almost certain you're the woman I met 15 years ago and never forgot. And your daughter is wearing the pendant I gave you. Maybe I just like the atmosphere," he said, handing her a $10 bill. "It's authentic." "Authentic?" Kate repeated, giving him the change. "That's a new one." Sophie appeared beside Daniel, tugging at his dress pants. "Can I tell you a secret?" She whispered loudly enough for half the cafe to hear. "Sophie," Kate warned, "Mom thinks you're handsome, but she told Aunt Jenny that men in suits are trouble." The silence that followed was broken only by the espresso machine. Kate closed her eyes, clearly wishing the floor would swallow her whole. "Sophie Rodriguez, you're going a week without drawing if you don't stop talking nonsense." "But it's true," Sophie protested. "You said he has interesting eyes." Daniel tried to hide his smile, but it was impossible. "Interesting eyes? Please ignore my daughter, who has apparently decided to become a professional gossip," Kate said, her cheeks flushed as she went back to work. "Anything else you need besides the cappuccino?" Before Daniel could answer, his phone rang. It was Marcus. "Excuse me," he said, picking up. "Hi, Marcus." "Daniel, the meeting with the Japanese investors was moved up to 11 o'clock. You need to come up now." Daniel glanced at his watch. 10:45. All right, I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at Kate, an idea forming in his mind. Actually, there is something you can do for me. 45 minutes later, Kate was in the elevator, holding a tray of coffee and trying not to panic. What had started as a simple request, "Can you bring a coffee up to my office once things calm down here?" now felt like a questionable decision. The elevator stopped on the 47th floor, and the doors opened to reveal a space that looked straight out of an architecture magazine. Marble floors, glass walls, modern art hanging in perfect symmetry, and a breathtaking view of Manhattan. "Wow," she murmured, walking toward the reception desk. "Can I help you?" asked a receptionist, impeccably dressed. "I brought coffee for Mr. Parker from the cafe downstairs." The receptionist gave her a strange look, as if Kate had said she came to feed the unicorns, but pointed toward a hallway. "Last door on the right." Kate walked down the corridor, taking in the expensive paintings and plants that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She stopped in front of a massive wooden door with a gold plaque. "Daniel Parker?" She knocked lightly. "Come in," came his voice from the other side. Kate pushed the door open and almost dropped the tray. The office was larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. There was a sitting area with Italian leather sofas, and Daniel's desk was a one-of-a-kind glass and metal piece that probably cost more than her car. "Wow," she said without thinking. "This is wow." Daniel was on the phone but motioned for her to come in. Kate stepped carefully toward the desk, trying not to trip over the Persian rug covering part of the floor. "Yes, I understand," Daniel was saying into the phone. "Confirm for Monday." Then he hung up and smiled at Kate. "Thanks for coming up. You can set it right here on the desk." Kate stepped closer to the desk, which was covered in papers, 2 open laptops, and several expensive pens scattered around. She tried to find a free spot for the tray when her eyes landed on a framed photo. A younger Daniel on some beach, smiling at the camera with his arm around her. The shock made her hands wobble, and the tray tilted. The sugar packets she had brought scattered, some falling directly onto the open laptop keyboard. "Oh no," she exclaimed, trying to grab them. "I'm so sorry." "Don't worry about it," Daniel said quickly, standing to help. "It's nothing." But Kate barely heard him. Her eyes were locked on the photo. It was her, no doubt. Younger, with longer hair, wearing a blue blouse she remembered perfectly. And next to her, a younger Daniel with the same smile he was trying to hide now. "Kate, are you all right?" Before she could answer, the office door opened and a woman walked in without knocking. Tall, blonde, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than Kate's monthly salary. "Daniel, I need you to sign these." The woman stopped when she saw Kate, her expression shifting instantly. "Oh, Veronica," Daniel said, and Kate caught a note of tension in his voice. Kate was just bringing coffee. Veronica looked Kate up and down with an expression that was somehow both condescending and territorial. "Kate," she repeated slowly. "Kate Rodriguez." Kate blinked in surprise. "You know me?" "Of course I do." Veronica smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "You used to live on Maple Street, right? 2 houses down from my cousin Lucia." "I was there all the time." Kate's stomach tightened. Maple Street had been where she lived during her teenage years in a small house she shared with her mother and 2 brothers. They weren't memories she liked to revisit. "That was a long time ago," Kate said carefully. "It was," Veronica agreed, stepping closer. "Funny how people change, isn't it? Some for the better, others," she shrugged. "Well, at least you managed to get a job downstairs." The implication was clear, and Kate felt her face grow hot with indignation. "Veronica," Daniel began, but she ignored him. "It's interesting," Veronica went on, toying with an expensive pen. "A girl from Maple Street now personally bringing coffee to the CO. Some might say that's convenient." "What exactly are you implying?" Kate asked, dropping any pretense of politeness. "I'm not implying anything," Veronica said with an innocent smile. "I just find it curious how certain people always seem to find ways to get close to successful men, especially single mothers who need to support their children." The silence that followed was tense. Kate felt anger rising in her chest, But before she could answer, Daniel stepped between them. "Veronica, that's enough." "Relax, Daniel," Veronica laughed. "I'm sure Kate understands I'm just making an observation. After all, it's not the first time I've seen this kind of strategy." Kate picked up the empty tray and headed for the door. "My coffee's paid for and delivered. Can I get back to work now?" "Kate, wait," Daniel called, but she was already leaving. Out in the hallway, Kate took a deep breath, trying to steady the trembling in her hands. The photo on Daniel's desk, Veronica's poisonous comments, the way he had been showing up at the cafe every day, something very strange was going on, and Kate had the feeling she was being manipulated in a way she couldn't quite understand yet. Kate had barely reached the ground floor when she heard the sharp sound of high heels quickly coming down the emergency stairs. Veronica burst into the lobby like a blonde hurricane, clearly determined not to let the conversation end upstairs. "Kate," she called, loud enough for half the cafe to look over. "You forgot to bring your tray back." Kate stopped, realizing several people had paused their conversations to watch. Among them, she recognized a few executives who frequented the cafe and some regular customers. "Thank you," Kate said simply, holding out her hand to take the tray. But Veronica wasn't interested in a quiet exchange. Instead, she raised her voice even more. "You know, folks," she said to the growing audience, "I just witnessed something very interesting upstairs. Our cafe employee here had a private meeting with the CEO." Kate felt her stomach drop. "It wasn't a meeting. I just delivered coffee." Of course, Veronica laughed. "That's what they all say. I was just delivering coffee." Funny how these coincidences always seem to involve women who are, how shall I put it, in need. A murmur started to ripple through the crowd. Kate saw Jenny, her coworker, step out from behind the counter with a worried expression. "Excuse me?" one of the executives asked. "What exactly are you talking about?" Veronica smiled like a cat that had found a mouse. "Well, isn't it obvious? A single mother working 2 jobs suddenly gets direct access to the CEO's office. Do you think that's professional?" Kate felt her face burn but forced herself to stay calm. "Can I know what your problem is with me?" "My problem?" Veronica feigned surprise. "I have no problem at all. I just think it's interesting to observe how some people operate, especially when they have children to support and, well, few options." "Hold on," a regular customer, Mrs. Chen, stood from her table. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," Veronica said, raising her hands dramatically. "I'm just saying it's curious how certain women always find ways to get close to men with money, especially when they're desperate." The tense silence was broken by a laugh. To everyone's surprise, it came from Kate. "Wow," she said, shaking her head. "You really practiced that speech in the mirror before running down here, didn't you?" A few customers chuckled quietly. Veronica frowned. "Excuse me?" Kate crossed her arms and smiled. "I'm just impressed by your level of dedication. I mean, you ran down the stairs, everyone saw you out of breath, just to make a scene about me taking coffee upstairs. That's intense." More laughter now, louder this time. Veronica's face began to turn red. "I'm not making a scene." "You're not?" Kate looked around. "Because where I come from, when someone puts on a show like this in the middle of a cafe, we call it drama. Or maybe envy. Hard to tell." "Envy?" Veronica nearly shouted. "Of you?" "I don't know," Kate shrugged. "You're the one who chased me down here to talk about my life. I didn't chase you to talk about yours." The impromptu audience began murmuring their approval. Jenny started clapping slowly, and others joined in. "Look," Kate continued, "I don't know what your history with Mr. Parker is, but I can assure you it has nothing to do with me. I work here. I do my job, and I go home to take care of my daughter. If that bothers you so much, maybe the problem isn't me." "You don't know anything," Veronica exploded. "You don't know Daniel like I do. Women like you always show up trying to take advantage of successful men." "Women like me," Kate repeated, her voice turning colder. "Who work honestly to support their children?" Just then, Sophie came running from the children's playground in the cafe's courtyard. She had heard raised voices and came to investigate. "Mom," she asked, sensing the tension, Why is everyone staring? Veronica saw an opportunity and pointed at the little girl. And there's the proof. A child without a father, being raised by a mother who clearly can't manage without. Stop! Sophie shouted, startling everyone with the strength in her small voice. Stop yelling at my mom. She planted herself in front of Kate, fists clenched, wearing a furious expression that was almost comical on her 6-year-old face. My mom is the best mom in the world, Sophie went on, her voice carrying across the cafe. She works really hard to take care of me, and you're a mean person for talking like that. A collective rippled through the crowd. Veronica, clearly not expecting to be challenged by a child, hesitated. Sophie, honey, Kate began, trying to calm her. But Sophie wasn't done. With the straightforward logic of a 6-year-old, she looked around at all the watching faces and made a decision that would change everything. And besides, she said, pointing at Daniel, who had just stepped out of the elevator after hearing the commotion, my daddy is going to be really mad if you keep yelling at my mommy. The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in the cafe turned to stare at Daniel, who froze in the middle of the lobby as if he'd been hit. Kate felt the blood drain from her face. Sophie, don't. Daddy. Veronica repeated, her voice shooting up an octave. Daddy. The murmurings spread through the cafe like wildfire. People began whispering urgently to each other, some pulling out their phones to record. Wait, one of the executives said slowly. Daniel Parker has a daughter with the cafe employee? Another added, and never acknowledged her? A third voice asked, horrified. Daniel stood rooted to the spot, clearly in shock. His eyes moved from Sophie to Kate, then to the crowd of accusing faces around him. This is, he began, but his voice faltered. This is disgusting, Mrs. Chin said, shaking her head. A rich man who won't even acknowledge his own child. Another customer chimed in. Sophie, Kate said, crouching down and scooping Sophie into her arms, feeling the weight of all those stares. Daniel was still frozen in place, struggling to process what had just happened. I can't believe this, Veronica said, though now her voice had a different edge. She no longer sounded triumphant, just stunned. Daniel, is this true? Daniel's penthouse took up the top 2 floors of the Parker Tower and had a 360 degrees view of Manhattan. Kate stood in the entryway for a moment, holding the 2 suitcases that contained her and Sophie's entire lives, trying to process that they would be living there for the next 30 days. Mom, look. Sophie had dropped her backpack and was running through the open space. There's a staircase inside the house. Careful, Sophie, Kate called automatically, then turned to Daniel. Can she touch everything? Daniel laughed. It's a home, not a museum. Let her explore. You don't know Sophie exploring, Kate muttered, but followed them into the main living area. What she saw made her stop again. Beyond the expensive furniture and the breathtaking view, there was something Daniel had clearly done with Sophie in mind. A pile of brand new toys in one corner, children's books on the coffee table, and what looked like a tablet loaded with educational games. You bought all this? Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, clearly a little embarrassed. I thought she might need a few things. I don't know much about kids. Before Kate could answer, Sophie came running from what was apparently the kitchen. Mom, there's a fridge that talks. What do you mean talks? It said, door open, when I opened it, and it has a screen like a computer. Kate looked at Daniel. Your fridge is smarter than my car. Probably more expensive too, he said without thinking, then realized how it sounded. Sorry, I didn't mean. Relax, Kate laughed. It's true. Carmen, Daniel's housekeeper, appeared in the room carrying their bags. Mr. Parker, where would you like me to put the ladies' luggage? The main guest room for Kate, and Sophie can have the blue room. It gets the most light. Sophie stopped examining the toys. Carmen is a pretty name. Do you live here too? No, sweetheart, Carmen smiled. I come every day to take care of Mr. Parker's home, and now I'll be taking care of you too. Cool. Sophie clapped her hands. Do you know how to make pancakes? Sophie, Kate warned, don't go asking people for things. It's all right, Carmen said. And yes, I do. How about we make some together tomorrow morning? Sophie squealed and hugged Carmen's legs, clearly melting her heart with the display of affection. "She's adorable," Carmen whispered to Kate. "How long have you two been together?" Kate opened her mouth, not sure what to say, but Daniel spoke first. "We're still figuring things out. It's recent." Carmen nodded with understanding. Relationships with children involved do take time, but you two make a nice couple. After Carmen left to get the rooms ready, Daniel showed the apartment to Kate and Sophie. The little girl was absolutely fascinated by everything: the hot tub, the walk-in closet that was bigger than their old living room, and especially the indoor pool. "Can I swim now?" she asked, already kicking off her shoes. "Sophie, you didn't bring a swimsuit," Kate said. "She can swim in her clothes," Daniel offered. "Or we can buy swimsuits tomorrow." "Really?" Sophie looked at Kate, eyes shining. "You can, but just for a few minutes, and I'll be right here watching." While Sophie played in the shallow water, Kate and Daniel sat on nearby lounge chairs. "Thank you," Kate said, "for all this. I know it must feel strange to have strangers in your home." "You're not strangers," Daniel replied, then seemed to realize the weight of his words. "I mean, Sophie's an amazing kid. And you? You seem to handle change well." "I was born and raised adapting," Kate said simply. "That's what single mothers do." They were interrupted by Sophie's shout. "Daniel, come see how I can swim on my back." Daniel looked at Kate, who nodded, and he walked over to the pool. Kate watched them interact. Daniel, clearly inexperienced with kids, but trying, and Sophie, just being Sophie, naturally charming and talkative. "Do you have kids?" Sophie asked suddenly. "No," Daniel said. "You're my first experience with children." "Mom said you're rich. Don't rich people have kids?" Kate nearly choked on her water. "Sophie, it's a fair question," Daniel laughed. "And the answer is, some do, some don't. I was too busy working. But now you have us." Daniel looked at Kate over Sophie's head. "Yeah, now I have you." That first night, Kate discovered that cooking in Daniel's kitchen was like trying to operate a spaceship. The stove had a digital screen with more options than an airplane cockpit. The fridge actually spoke every time someone came near it. And there were gadgets she couldn't even guess the use of. "Need help?" Daniel asked, finding her standing in front of the oven, clearly lost. "How do you turn this thing on?" Kate pointed at what looked like an oven but had so many buttons it could have been a lab device. Daniel stepped closer, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her stomach give a small jolt. "You just touch here," he said, reaching an arm around her to tap the screen. "See, then you set the temperature here and the time here." Kate was very aware of how close he was. "This is more complicated than my job. You'll get used to it, or you could ask Carmen to cook." "No," Kate said firmly. "I'm not turning into some spoiled princess just because I'm living in a penthouse for a month." Daniel smiled in a way that made her heart speed up. "I admire that about you." Before Kate could ask what he meant, Sophie came running in. "Mom, Daniel, I found something amazing." They followed her to the pool, where Kate stopped in horror. Sophie had found the laundry detergent kept in a laundry room next to the pool area and dumped half of it into the water. The pool was now filled with foam, looking like a giant bubble bath. "Sophie," Kate shouted, "what did you do?" "I made a bubble pool. Look how cool it is." The water was completely white with foam, and Sophie was in the middle of it, covered head to toe in bubbles, grinning as if she'd just discovered the eighth wonder of the world. Daniel stayed silent for a moment, then burst out laughing, real belly laughter, bending forward. "I don't see what's so funny," Kate said, though she was struggling not to laugh herself. "How are we going to clean this up?" "I have no idea," Daniel said between laughs. "But I have to admit it's creative." Sophie dove under and came up completely covered in bubbles. "Do you guys want to come in? It feels amazing." "Absolutely not," Kate said, but couldn't help laughing when Sophie made a foam angel, moving her arms and legs as if she were in snow. "It's going to take hours to get all this foam out," Kate said. "I'll clean it," Kate offered. "It's my fault for not keeping an eye on her." "We'll clean it," Daniel corrected. "She's our responsibility now, remember?" By the third day, Kate was starting to get used to the strange routine of living in a penthouse when Daniel had an important video conference. He'd asked her and Sophie to stay in their rooms during the meeting. But Sophie had other plans. Kate was in the bathroom when she heard Daniel speaking in formal English to what were clearly important people. Seconds later, she heard Sophie. "Hi." The girl's cheerful voice rang through the office. "Are you Daniel's friends?" Kate rushed out of the bathroom and found Sophie sitting on Daniel's lap, waving at the computer screen where several people in suits stared back with surprised expressions. "Sorry," Daniel said to the screen, clearly embarrassed. "This is Sophie." "I'm his daughter," Sophie announced happily. "Well, not really yet, but he's dating my mom, so it's going to be like he's my stepdad." Kate could see the faces on the screen shift from surprise to interest. A woman smiled. "How sweet. How old are you, dear?" 6.5, Sophie held up her fingers. "And Daniel is really nice. He let me swim in his pool and didn't get mad when I put soap in the water." "Sophie," Kate appeared on the screen, pulling the girl away. "Sorry, Daniel." She slipped away. "Hi, Mom." Sophie waved. "I'm meeting Daniel's friends." One of the men on the screen laughed. "Looks like you've got your hands full, Parker." "Yeah, right," Daniel smiled, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry for the interruption." Once Kate got Sophie out of the room, Daniel returned to the meeting, but he could still hear his colleagues' comments about how refreshing it was to see him in a family moment and how adorable Sophie was. That night at dinner, Kate watched Daniel and Sophie chatting about the drawings she had made during the day. There was something different about the way he looked at them, more attentive, more affectionate. "Mom, tell Daniel about the pendant," Sophie said suddenly. Kate felt her blood run cold. "Sophie, it's really special," Sophie went on, unaware of the tension she had just created. "It was from someone very important." Daniel stopped cutting his food, his eyes fixed on Kate. "Really?" Kate nervously adjusted the pendant around Sophie's neck, avoiding his gaze. "It's a family heirloom." "What kind of heirloom?" Sophie leaned forward, eager to tell the story. "Mom said someone very special gave it to her when she was young. And one day, when I'm older, she'll tell me the whole story." Daniel set his fork down. Kate could feel his eyes on her, but she couldn't look at him. "Must be an interesting story," he said slowly. "It is," Sophie agreed. "Mom always gets this strange look when she talks about it, like she's sad and happy at the same time." Kate finally met Daniel's eyes and saw something there that made her heart race: recognition, certainty, and something else she couldn't quite name, but that made her feel like she was 18 again, in love with a boy she knew she could never have. "Sophie," she said quickly, standing up, "how about we get some ice cream and watch a movie?" "Yay!" Sophie jumped up and ran to the living room. Kate began clearing the plates, but Daniel gently caught her wrist. "Kate," he said softly, "we need to talk." She swallowed hard. "About what?" "You know what." Kate pulled her arm back gently. "I don't know what you're talking about." But as she followed Sophie into the living room, she knew her time was up. Daniel had figured out the truth. And now she wasn't sure if she was pretending to date her daughter's father or the man who had broken her heart 15 years ago, or worse, if they were the same person. "I can't wear this," Kate said for the 5th time, looking at the navy blue gown Daniel had sent over. "It costs more than my car." "You don't have a car," Sophie pointed out from Kate's bed, watching her get ready for the charity gala. "And it's really pretty." "She's right," Daniel said from the bedroom doorway. "You look beautiful." Kate turned toward him, adjusting the neckline for the 100th time. The dress really was stunning, fabric that felt like water sliding over her skin, a cut that flattered her curves without being revealing, but it also cost more than she made in 6 months. "I'm sure I'm going to spill something or tear something." "You won't," Daniel said, stepping closer and, much to her surprise, tucking a loose strand of hair back into the elegant style Carmen had insisted on. "You're going to be perfect." His touch was so gentle, Kate felt her skin tingle. "How can you be so sure?" "Because," he said, lowering his voice, "you've always been perfect at everything you've done." Kate looked at him, sensing there was more meaning behind those words than she was ready to face. "Am I going to?" Sophie asked hopefully. No, honey, Kate said, snapping out of her thoughts. You're staying with Carmen. She said you two are going to make cookies. Can I make some for you to take to the party? You don't take cookies to a gala, Daniel laughed. But you can make some for when we get back. Sophie clapped her hands and ran off to find Carmen. Kate was left alone with Daniel, suddenly very aware of how close they seemed in that moment. Ready? He asked, offering his arm. As ready as anyone can be to pretend to be a millionaire's girlfriend at a party full of important people, Kate sighed, taking his arm. The charity gala was being held in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, and Kate had never seen so much luxury in one place. Baccarat crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Tables were covered in linens that probably cost more than her old rent. And the guests looked as though they'd stepped straight out of a fashion magazine. Breathe, Daniel whispered when he felt her stiffen beside him. They're just people. People who could buy my whole life with the change in their pockets, Kate murmured back. People who are dying to meet the woman who captured Manhattan's most eligible bachelor, a warm female voice said behind them. They turned to find an elegant woman in her 50s, wearing a genuinely friendly smile. Daniel, dear, aren't you going to introduce me? Of course, Daniel smiled. Elizabeth Morrison, this is Kate Rodriguez. Kate, Elizabeth is the president of the foundation we're supporting tonight. It's a pleasure to meet you, Elizabeth said, extending her hand. I have to say, Daniel has been completely different since you two have been together. I've never seen him so human. Kate laughed, relaxing a little. He's still learning to live with a 6-year-old. Yesterday, Sophie convinced him to have a pillow fight. A pillow fight? Elizabeth laughed out loud. Daniel Parker in a pillow fight? I'll need photos to believe that. Please don't give her any ideas, Daniel said, but he was smiling. As the night went on, Kate was surprised to find she was actually enjoying herself. People were warmer than she expected. Her stories about Sophie brought genuine laughter. And Daniel was the perfect date, attentive without being overbearing, including her in conversations, always with a hand on her back or touching her arm in a natural way. You're a natural at this, he said when they had a quiet moment at the bar. A natural at what? At making people feel good. Look around, he gestured subtly. Everyone you've spoken to is smiling more than when they arrived. Kate glanced around and saw he was right. It's just being friendly. No, it's more than that. You have a gift. Before Kate could ask what he meant, the music shifted to something slower and more romantic. Want to dance? Daniel offered his hand. Kate hesitated. I'm not sure I know how to dance to this kind of music. I'll teach you. On the dance floor, Daniel drew her into his arms with such ease that Kate's heart skipped a beat. He was an excellent dancer, guiding her with smooth movements that made it feel like she actually knew what she was doing. Relax, he murmured when he felt her tension. Let me lead. She let herself relax in his arms, and for a moment, forgot it was all an act. It was just her and Daniel dancing as though they were meant for it. Kate, Daniel said softly, and there was something different in his voice. I need to tell you, Daniel, a voice interrupted. Veronica was approaching across the dance floor, glowing in a red dress that clearly cost a fortune. May I steal him for a dance? Kate and Daniel stepped apart, the moment broken. Of course, Kate said, hiding her irritation. Thank you, Veronica smiled, though there was something calculating in her eyes. It's a tradition at the company. I always dance with Daniel at these events. Kate stepped off the floor and went to the bar for a glass of water. Through the crowd, she could see Daniel and Veronica dancing, Veronica speaking animatedly while Daniel seemed to be politely listening. Be careful with her, a voice said beside her. Kate turned to see a man in his 40s with a friendly smile. Marcus Chin, Daniel's assistant, and you must be the famous Kate. Famous. Daniel hasn't talked about anything else all week. Kate said this, Sophie did that. Marcus chuckled. It's refreshing to see him like this. Like what? Happy. Truly happy, not just successful. Kate glanced toward the dance floor. Why did you say I should be careful with Veronica? Because she's been in love with Daniel for years, and she doesn't take competition very well. And you, my dear, are the first woman he's ever taken seriously. Well, ever. Before Kate could fully process that, Veronica appeared beside her. Daniel was no longer on the dance floor. "Kate," Veronica said brightly. "What a beautiful dress. May I take a closer look at the details?" Kate frowned, confused, but turned so Veronica could see the back of her dress. That's when she felt a sharp tug. Ouch! She turned and saw that one of Veronica's bracelets had snagged the delicate fabric, tearing it from the shoulder almost down to the waist. "Oh no!" Veronica exclaimed theatrically. "How did that happen? What a shame." Kate could feel eyes on her from all around, with a few people whispering. The dress was clearly ruined, and now her back was basically exposed in the middle of a high society gala. "These things happen," Kate said, keeping her voice steady despite the heat of humiliation in her cheeks. "Accidents happen." "Maybe you should head home," Veronica suggested with fake concern. "It can't be comfortable staying like that." Kate felt anger rising, but before she could respond, she remembered something: the silk scarf Carmen had insisted she bring in case it got chilly. She had left it on the table. "You know what?" Kate said loudly enough for several people to hear. "You're right. This is uncomfortable." Daniel's penthouse took up the top 2 floors of the Parker Tower and had a 360 degrees view of Manhattan. Kate stood in the entryway for a moment, holding the 2 suitcases that contained her and Sophie's entire lives, trying to process that they would be living there for the next 30 days. "Mom, look." Sophie had dropped her backpack and was running through the open space. "There's a staircase inside the house." "Careful, Sophie," Kate called automatically, then turned to Daniel. "Can she touch everything?" Daniel laughed. "It's a home, not a museum. Let her explore." "You don't know Sophie exploring," Kate muttered, but followed them into the main living area. What she saw made her stop again. Beyond the expensive furniture and the breathtaking view, there was something Daniel had clearly done with Sophie in mind. A pile of brand new toys in one corner, children's books on the coffee table, and what looked like a tablet loaded with educational games. "You bought all this?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, clearly a little embarrassed. "I thought she might need a few things. I don't know much about kids." Before Kate could answer, Sophie came running from what was apparently the kitchen. "Mom, there's a fridge that talks." "What do you mean talks?" "It said, 'Door open,' when I opened it, and it has a screen like a computer." Kate looked at Daniel. "Your fridge is smarter than my car." "Probably more expensive too," he said without thinking, then realized how it sounded. "Sorry, I didn't mean." "Relax," Kate laughed. "It's true." Carmen, Daniel's housekeeper, appeared in the room carrying their bags. "Mr. Parker, where would you like me to put the ladies' luggage?" "The main guest room for Kate, and Sophie can have the blue room. It gets the most light." Sophie stopped examining the toys. "Carmen is a pretty name. Do you live here too?" "No, sweetheart," Carmen smiled. "I come every day to take care of Mr. Parker's home, and now I'll be taking care of you too." "Cool." Sophie clapped her hands. "Do you know how to make pancakes?" "Sophie," Kate warned, "don't go asking people for things." "It's all right," Carmen said. "And yes, I do. How about we make some together tomorrow morning?" Sophie squealed and hugged Carmen's legs, clearly melting her heart with the display of affection. "She's adorable," Carmen whispered to Kate. "How long have you two been together?" Kate opened her mouth, not sure what to say, but Daniel spoke first. "We're still figuring things out. It's recent." Carmen nodded with understanding. "Relationships with children involved do take time, but you two make a nice couple." After Carmen left to get the rooms ready, Daniel showed the apartment to Kate and Sophie. The little girl was absolutely fascinated by everything: the hot tub, the walk-in closet that was bigger than their old living room, and especially the indoor pool. "Can I swim now?" she asked, already kicking off her shoes. "Sophie, you didn't bring a swimsuit," Kate said. "She can swim in her clothes," Daniel offered. "Or we can buy swimsuits tomorrow." "Really?" Sophie looked at Kate, eyes shining. "You can, but just for a few minutes, and I'll be right here watching." While Sophie played in the shallow water, Kate and Daniel sat on nearby lounge chairs. "Thank you," Kate said. For all this, I know it must feel strange to have strangers in your home. You're not strangers, Daniel replied, then seemed to realize the weight of his words. I mean, Sophie's an amazing kid. And you? You seem to handle change well. I was born and raised adapting, Kate said simply. That's what single mothers do. They were interrupted by Sophie's shout. Daniel, come see how I can swim on my back. Daniel looked at Kate, who nodded, and he walked over to the pool. Kate watched them interact. Daniel, clearly inexperienced with kids, but trying, and Sophie, just being Sophie, naturally charming and talkative. Do you have kids? Sophie asked suddenly. No, Daniel said. You're my first experience with children. Mom said you're rich. Don't rich people have kids? Kate nearly choked on her water. Sophie, it's a fair question, Daniel laughed. And the answer is, some do, some don't. I was too busy working. But now you have us. Daniel looked at Kate over Sophie's head. Yeah, now I have you. That first night, Kate discovered that cooking in Daniel's kitchen was like trying to operate a spaceship. The stove had a digital screen with more options than an airplane cockpit. The fridge actually spoke every time someone came near it. And there were gadgets she couldn't even guess the use of. Need help? Daniel asked, finding her standing in front of the oven, clearly lost. How do you turn this thing on? Kate pointed at what looked like an oven but had so many buttons it could have been a lab device. Daniel stepped closer, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her stomach give a small jolt. You just touch here, he said, reaching an arm around her to tap the screen. See, then you set the temperature here and the time here. Kate was very aware of how close he was. This is more complicated than my job. You'll get used to it, or you could ask Carmen to cook. No, Kate said firmly. I'm not turning into some spoiled princess just because I'm living in a penthouse for a month. Daniel smiled in a way that made her heart speed up. I admire that about you. Before Kate could ask what he meant, Sophie came running in. Mom, Daniel, I found something amazing. They followed her to the pool, where Kate stopped in horror. Sophie had found the laundry detergent kept in a laundry room next to the pool area and dumped half of it into the water. The pool was now filled with foam, looking like a giant bubble bath. Sophie, Kate shouted, what did you do? I made a bubble pool. Look how cool it is. The water was completely white with foam, and Sophie was in the middle of it, covered head to toe in bubbles, grinning as if she'd just discovered the eighth wonder of the world. Daniel stayed silent for a moment, then burst out laughing, real belly laughter, bending forward. I don't see what's so funny, Kate said, though she was struggling not to laugh herself. How are we going to clean this up? I have no idea, Daniel said between laughs. But I have to admit it's creative. Sophie dove under and came up completely covered in bubbles. Do you guys want to come in? It feels amazing. Absolutely not, Kate said, but couldn't help laughing when Sophie made a foam angel, moving her arms and legs as if she were in snow. It's going to take hours to get all this foam out, Kate said. I'll clean it, Kate offered. It's my fault for not keeping an eye on her. We'll clean it, Daniel corrected. She's our responsibility now, remember? By the third day, Kate was starting to get used to the strange routine of living in a penthouse when Daniel had an important video conference. He'd asked her and Sophie to stay in their rooms during the meeting. But Sophie had other plans. Kate was in the bathroom when she heard Daniel speaking in formal English to what were clearly important people. Seconds later, she heard Sophie. Hi. The girl's cheerful voice rang through the office. Are you Daniel's friends? Kate rushed out of the bathroom and found Sophie sitting on Daniel's lap, waving at the computer screen where several people in suits stared back with surprised expressions. Sorry, Daniel said to the screen, clearly embarrassed. This is Sophie. I'm his daughter, Sophie announced happily. Well, not really yet, but he's dating my mom, so it's going to be like he's my stepdad. Kate could see the faces on the screen shift from surprise to interest. A woman smiled. How sweet. How old are you, dear? 6.5, Sophie held up her fingers. And Daniel is really nice. He let me swim in his pool and didn't get mad when I put soap in the water. Sophie, Kate appeared on the screen, pulling the girl away. "Sorry, Daniel." She slipped away. "Hi, Mom." Sophie waved. "I'm meeting Daniel's friends." One of the men on the screen laughed. "Looks like you've got your hands full, Parker." "Yeah, right." Daniel smiled, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry for the interruption." Once Kate got Sophie out of the room, Daniel returned to the meeting, but he could still hear his colleagues' comments about how refreshing it was to see him in a family moment and how adorable Sophie was. That night at dinner, Kate watched Daniel and Sophie chatting about the drawings she had made during the day. There was something different about the way he looked at them, more attentive, more affectionate. Ricardo's shout stopped abruptly when the officers' voices echoed in the corridor. Kate heard a commotion outside, orders being given, Ricardo mumbling protests, and finally the sound of handcuffs. "Mr. Parker," an authoritative voice called from the other side. "NYPD, is everything okay in there?" Daniel looked at Kate, who was still holding a trembling Sophie, before moving toward the door. "We're fine," he answered. "But I won't open until I know he's been taken away." "Understood, sir. The individual is in custody. We'll need a statement." 15 minutes later, when they finally opened the door, Kate's legs nearly gave out in relief. Ricardo was gone, leaving only 2 uniformed officers in the hall. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" the older officer asked. "I'm Sergeant Martinez. We need to understand what happened here." Over the next hour, Kate explained about the court summons, Ricardo's abandonment, and his sudden reappearance. Daniel stayed by her side the whole time, steady and protective. "Mr. Morales was clearly under the influence," the sergeant noted. "He'll spend the night in jail. We'll file for a temporary restraining order, but you need to see a lawyer first thing tomorrow." After the officers left, the penthouse felt strangely quiet. Sophie had stopped crying but still clung to Kate as if her life depended on it. "Can I have a glass of water?" Sophie asked in a small voice. "Of course, honey," Kate said. But when she tried to set her down, Sophie held on tighter. "I don't want to leave your arms," she whispered. "What if the angry man comes back?" Daniel knelt down so he was at her level. "Sophie, can I tell you a secret?" The little girl looked at him, her eyes still red from crying. "What secret?" "I will never, ever let anyone take you and your mom away from me," he said, his voice firm but gentle at the same time. "No matter what happens, you two are my family now, and I protect my family." Sophie studied his face with that seriousness only children can have. "Promise. Promise." Daniel held out his pinky. "Pinky promise." Sophie hooked her tiny finger around his. "Pinky promises are the most important ones of all." "Exactly." Daniel smiled. "And I never break a pinky promise." Kate watched them, feeling something stir deep in her chest. The way Daniel spoke, the certainty in his voice, the way Sophie trusted him instantly, it was like she was seeing a side of him she never imagined existed. "How about we go get that glass of water in the kitchen?" Daniel suggested. "And maybe some hot chocolate for everyone." "With marshmallows?" Sophie asked, perking up a little. "With all the marshmallows in the world," Daniel promised. An hour later, Sophie had finally fallen asleep on the living room sofa, wrapped in a blanket and holding the teddy bear Daniel had bought her on their first day together. Kate and Daniel sat in the kitchen, still in silence, processing everything that had happened. "Thank you," Kate said at last. "For everything, for staying calm, for dealing with the police, for reassuring Sophie." "No need to thank me," Daniel said, stirring the coffee he'd made for both of them. "I meant what I told her." Kate studied him. "About protecting us, about being my family," he corrected. "I know this started as an arrangement, Kate, but it doesn't feel like that anymore." Kate felt her heart pick up speed. "Daniel, I know it's complicated," he leaned forward. "I know you have reasons not to trust easily, but what I felt when that man was outside threatening you, I've never felt anything like it. It was like someone was trying to rip my heart out." Kate looked down at her hands, fighting the urge to open up completely. "You don't really know me, Daniel. You don't know my story, where I come from." "Then tell me." "It's complicated." "I've got time." Kate lifted her eyes to meet his, steady, patient, waiting. For a moment, She almost told him everything, about the summer 15 years ago, about the boy she had loved and lost, about how she had kept the pendant all these years as a reminder of when she believed fairy tales could be real. But then she remembered the difference between them, the temporary nature of their arrangement, the fact that in 2 weeks, everything would go back to normal. Maybe another day, she said softly. Today was too much already. Daniel nodded, clearly disappointed but respecting her space. Of course, you must be exhausted. I am, Kate admitted, standing. I'll take Sophie to her bed. Kate, Daniel called as she was leaving the kitchen. What I told Sophie, it wasn't just to calm her down. I truly intend to protect both of you, from Ricardo, from the lawyers, from anyone who tries to hurt you. Kate looked at him differently then, not just as the wealthy CEO paying for a charade, but as something else, something that both scared and drew her in. Good night, Daniel, she said quietly and left the kitchen, carrying Sophie. The next morning, Kate woke to the sound of voices in the living room. She recognized Daniel's voice and another she couldn't place. She glanced at the clock, 8:30. Daniel should have been at the office at least an hour ago. She slipped on a robe and stepped out of the bedroom. In the living room, she found Daniel sitting on the sofa with an older man, gray-haired and serious-looking. Papers were spread out on the coffee table. Oh, Kate, Daniel stood. This is James Morrison, the private investigator I hired. Kate's stomach dropped. Private investigator? To help with Ricardo's case, Daniel explained quickly. We need information on him for the custody process. James stood and held out his hand. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Rodriguez. While I was looking into Mr. Morales's background, I came across some interesting information about you as well. Kate felt the blood drain from her face. What kind of information? James glanced at Daniel, who gave him a nod to go on. Well, when I was checking old records, I found some curious connections. James opened a folder. You lived in Santa Monica during the summer of 2009, didn't you? Kate slowly sat down. How do you know that? Employment records. You worked at an ice cream shop on the beach, James continued. And during that time, you spent time at certain places. Daniel was watching Kate closely. James, could you be more specific? You met Daniel that summer, James said plainly. You spent time together. There are photographs, statements from people who saw you together. The silence that followed was deafening. Kate could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. And there's more, James went on, pulling something from the folder. This photo was taken that summer. It was the same picture Kate had seen on Daniel's desk at the office. 2 young people smiling, arms around each other on the beach. But this time, she could clearly see the pendant Daniel was putting around her neck. The same pendant your daughter wears today, James concluded. Daniel turned to Kate, his expression a mix of realization and relief. You knew, he said quietly. From the very first day, you knew who I was. Kate closed her eyes. There was no escaping the truth now. Yes, she whispered. I knew. Why didn't you say anything? Kate opened her eyes and met his gaze. Because you were Daniel Parker, a millionaire CEO, and I was Kate Rodriguez, a single mom serving coffee. Because 15 years had passed, and we were completely different people by then. Are we? Daniel asked, standing and moving toward her. Because when I look at you, I see the same girl who made me laugh until my stomach hurt. The same one who stayed up all night talking about dreams. The same one you left behind when that summer ended, Kate interrupted, the old hurt rushing back. The same one who waited for a phone call that never came. Daniel stopped in front of her. Kate, do you want me to step out? James asked awkwardly. Yes, Kate and Daniel said at the same time. Once James left, they just stared at each other, 15 years of unspoken history hanging in the air. We need to talk, Daniel said. Yes, Kate agreed. We do. But before either of them could say more, Sophie came running in from the kitchen, still in her pajamas. Good morning, she said brightly. Carmen's making butterfly-shaped pancakes. Come see. Kate and Daniel exchanged a look. The conversation would have to wait. But now, at least, there were no more secrets between them. Daniel spent the rest of the day planning how he would tell Kate everything. After that morning's revelation, he knew he had to explain why he never reached out, why it had taken him so long to acknowledge her, and most of all, how his feelings had grown from simple nostalgia into something much deeper. He had arranged a special dinner in the penthouse. Sophie would spend the night at a school friend's house. Carmen would prepare Kate's favorite dish, and he would finally be honest about everything, about the summer of 2009, about how he had never been able to forget her, about how finding her again felt like fate. But Veronica had other plans. Kate was at the cafe, finishing her afternoon shift, when Veronica walked in, wearing a look that mixed triumph with fake concern. "Kate, dear," she said, sitting at one of the empty tables.